with the 200.
All right, all right, all right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of That's an Awful Take. Awful Take, sorry. I'm your host, Price Mancer, your hostess with the mostest, here to make the most out of your day. Hope everyone's having a wonderful week. Mine has been pretty good, honestly. I can't complain. And I've been getting stuff done, so that's good, including this episode. I'm gonna get this episode done. You know the vibes. But we got a very big episode today. Obviously, we had our draft show. If you guys missed out on that, I would extremely suggest going back and watching it. It was so much fun. Had the fellas over, had a couple guests on, but went through the whole NFL draft, the whole first round at least, and went through and got some great picks. Got to watch the whole first round, got to see everything live, and it was a lot of fun, really entertaining stuff. So I extremely suggest going back and watching that if you haven't. But yeah, it's just been super fun, super dope, cool stuff going on. So this week's episode, if you can tell by the title, we'll be going over the draft as a whole. The NFL draft grades, what I give each team, and how I feel each team did. And then next week we'll probably go into some more specifics about the draft in terms of sleepers or hidden gems, guys I really like, picks I really like, in later rounds and whatnot. But, without further ado, we're going to get into this episode because this one might be a little long, so we're going to see how it goes. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, lag there. But anyways, the first team we'll be going off of, we'll be doing it in alphabetical order, is Arizona Cardinals. So these grades are going to be determined by, what I think of the prospect, the pick, the potential the pick has, and the positional value of that pick. So without further ado, I'm actually going to take a sip of water before we get into it. But we're going to do Arizona. All right. So Arizona, their first overall pick was Walter Nolan, which I think is a great pick, especially in terms of value, in my opinion. I think Walter Nolan was a guy who could go off the board really at 10 or maybe 11 to San Francisco. I know I had that mocked a couple times, and so did several other analysts and whatnot. But, you look at the picks ahead. Miami picks Kenneth Grant, which I think the Kenneth Grant pick is definitely a reach. We'll get more into that with Miami's picks. But I believe, Nolan was a better D tackle. Nolan arguably probably the second best defensive tackle in this class, at least in my opinion. And think that Nolan is a great pick at 16. I think it's not really a reach at all. So I really like the Walter Nolan pick. And, I think that's not more or less like a B in terms of a pick. I think he does have potential. But I guess we'll just have to see. I mean, you got to remember Walter Nolan was kind of the crown jewel of that Texas A&M class from a couple of years ago. That was so huge and like 7 5-stars. So, yeah, I really like the Walter Nolan pick a lot. Next, we got Will Johnson. Once again, great value for this pick, right? I mean, we'll have to see how bad the injury is. That's the main reason why Will Johnson slid this far. But Will Johnson, there was a time where Will Johnson was mocked as a top 5, top 7 pick in the draft. And having him fall all the way to round 2 at pick 47 is just great value. I mean, he could be one of the best corners in this class. We'll have to see with the injury and whatnot. And I think with the injury, it makes sense that he falls this far. We saw this a lot in this draft, actually, is a lot of people falling due to injury, especially at the cornerback position. Just a couple guys like Will Johnson, Siobhan Revelle, and like Benjamin Morrison. Like all 3 of those guys fell super hard due to injury. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those guys pan out. But I think Will Johnson does have very good potential, and I think this is a great pick, especially in the second round at pick 47. I mean, I'll take that all day for Will Johnson. I'm not a big Jordan Burch believer. I don't think it's a great pick, but once again, it's kind of a depth piece. You got Cody Simon at Ohio State in the 4th round. I don't hate that pick at all. Denzel Burke, once again, Denzel Burke 2 years ago, was supposed to be, or at least last year, was projected to be like a top first round pick. Like he's supposed to be one of those top corners off the board, but had a lackluster 2024. And, if you could get back to that 2023 form with Denzel Burke, I don't think this is a terrible pick at all, especially in the 5th round. It's really not that bad. 174 for Denzel Burke is not bad whatsoever. But the rest of these picks, not really, anything that stands out. Maybe Keaton Crawford can be something, but obviously we'll have to see. Round 7 guy, safety from Nevada. I believe in Keaton Crawford, but we'll have to see how that goes. So overall, I'd give Arizona just a B. But I do think, this draft class does have pretty good potential between Will Johnson and Walter Nolan. So a B for Arizona. Next, we'll go to my Atlanta Falcons. Love that. I thought I muted this, but anyways, obviously Atlanta, only 5 picks in this year's draft, but I mean, I think really and truly it's a home run almost with every single one, right? You get Jalen Walker. He falls to you at 15, which, falling to Atlanta at 15 is a match made in heaven. Walker, in my opinion, was a top 10 prospect in this class. One of the best, whether that's off-ball linebacker or if it's off the edge. I mean, there's so much potential with Jalen Walker. He could play all over the field, It says edge, but, he can play a linebacker spot. He could play off the edge. There's going to be multiple packages in Ulbricht's defense that Jalen Walker is going to be put in, and it's going to be insane. Like, I think Jalen Walker, especially with Ulbricht is going to be a mastermind in putting Jalen Walker in all these different scenarios, all these different schemes, packages, whatever, and making sure that Jalen Walker is great. I think Jalen Walker has the potential to be like a true leader of this defense, especially moving forward. So I do think Jalen Walker is just an absolute home run pick. This is really the best pick they could have made, especially at 15. I mean, there's a lot of people saying James Pierce Jr., Mike Green. Like even in my last mock draft, I had Mike Green, but I don't think that Mike Green, looking back, it's now a reach, right? But Jalen Walker, great pick, phenomenal value. Getting him at 15 is just insane to me. So I love this pick. Next, you trade back into the 1st round and get James Pierce Jr. And, it's interesting to me, right? James Pierce Jr. is a great pick. He's a top 5 edge rusher in this class for sure. But, he did fall for a reason. And, obviously the 2024 wasn't as great as the 2023. James Pierce Jr. was a guy who was projected to go number 1 overall once upon a time and be like really great. And I still think there's potential for James Pierce Jr. to be super great. We just have to see it. And, moving forward, I think it's questionable, right? The future with him is questionable compared to Jalen Walker. I think you get a sure, you're pretty sure on his potential. But James Pierce Jr., very interested to see, especially size-wise. That edge is going to be very light for Atlanta. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they play him. And I do think he did improve as a run stopper, James Pierce Jr., but, obviously not as good as a pass rushing season as 2023 compared to 2024. But, I think if, he fulfills the potential, right? I mean, this guy was once projected to be a number 1 overall pick. If he fulfills the potential he's projected to be, then it's definitely worth it. Like, you trade the 1st round pick And, if he fixes the defensive line, and all of a sudden you're getting like a 20 something round or 20 something pick, I don't hate it, right? Whatever. James Pierce Jr. would be worth more than that. But, the hard part about giving the Falcons a higher grade than what I have right now is because, this trade is like, there's a lot, we're going to have to revisit this one, right? So I hope he fulfills his potential as a prospect, as an Atlanta fan. But anyways, Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame, great pick, great value, right? True ball hawk safety, had like 13 interceptions in his last 2 years, and like looked great. And having him opposite of Jesse Bates is even better, right? I think that's a more dynamic safety duo than it was with Justin Simmons. And Justin Simmons is great, but Xavier Watts has so much room to grow as a prospect. He's already a great ball hawk. I love ball hawks. I think, that's the best option we could have. And in the third round, like tremendous value for a guy who's arguably a top 5 safety in this class and has the potential to be a top 2 safety in this class, really and truly. If you think about it, you got Malachi Starks, you got Eamon Worry, you got Xavier Watts, you got the guy from Ohio State, I forget his name. But like you have guys who, they have real potential. Like Xavier Watts, I think, is a home run in the third round. And then in the fourth round, you get Billy Bowman Jr., safety out of Oklahoma. And I don't know if he'll stick at safety. He's a little short, 5'9", which is, not great size for a safety. That's why, I like Xavier Watts better. Like you look at the size of Xavier Watts here. Xavier Watts is, he's 6 foot, 204, like he athletically, I think he'll be a great starter at some point. But, you look at Billy Bowman here. You look at Billy Bowman here, and Billy Bowman, says 5'10", but 5'9", 190, a lot lighter. And, I think his best potential comes from him playing a nickel role, against the slot. We'll have to see how that goes, especially with the size. I mean, obviously a concern. But, could be that ball hawk safety that, or, another ball hawk corner maybe. Maybe he can, I don't think he could stick outside, but I think having him inside in the nickel or in some sort of safety package, where you have 3 safeties on the field between Watts, Bates, and Bowman, I think, especially in a year or two, there's some real potential with that. And then at round 7, we get Jack Nelson, tackle out of Wisconsin. I don't know much about Jack Nelson, but, just a depth piece, especially, on our O-line, especially at the tackle position where things, McGarry's dealt with issues and Jake Matthews old. I don't hate the pick at all. So overall, I give Atlanta a B+. Obviously, maybe that's low to some people, maybe it's high to some people, but it's just, where it currently stands, giving up the first round pick, I can't justify it just yet. So we'll see. We'll revisit this, in a couple years, and maybe it's like, oh, well, I'll increase the draft grade, because obviously the James Pierce Jr. trade works out, but we'll just have to see how that goes. So next up is the Baltimore Ravens. In Baltimore, wow, what a draft for Baltimore. Malachi Starks, first round. I mean, best safety in the class as it stands. And you get him at 27. Don't have to trade up for him or anything. I mean, this is a great pick, right? You have some guys that failed at the safety position before, and now you get Malachi Starks, revamped. I mean, was instantly a leader for that Georgia defense, and I think, has a real chance at being great. I think, in terms of potential-wise, especially for the safeties in this draft, Malachi Starks really has the highest. Even what you see athletically in Nick Eamon-Worry, I think Malachi Starks is still better. Like, the tape is so much better for Starks, in my opinion. But you pair him with Kyle Hamilton. At Georgia, Malachi Starks is playing everywhere. I mean, nickel, he was lining up at safety, he was coming off, like, he's rushing down from the edge at sometimes. But, like, Malachi Starks, getting to play a true safety role where Kyle Hamilton can kind of be that, sideline to sideline enforcer. Malachi Starks, you have him sit back, and then, you have great corners and Marlon Humphreys and Nate Wiggins. I mean, this is a very well put together defense. Not to mention at the linebackers, you got Roquan, you got Adefe Owe on the edge. Like, this is a great Baltimore defense. And Malachi Starks, at the top, over the top is just great for the Baltimore Ravens. So I'm a very big fan of the Malachi Starks pick. I mean, that is a absolute home run. One of the best picks of the first round, in my opinion. Next, we got Mike Green, So yeah, Mike Green, very big off the field issues, like very serious allegations against him and whatnot. And we'll see the validity of those allegations and whatnot. But that's all up to whatever happens. But in my opinion, as a football player, if we're looking at this as a football player, this is probably the best pick in the second round. And you get him at pick 27 in the second round as well, which is even crazier in my opinion. But I mean, the production, you can't deny the production, right? 17 sacks last season. Yes, it was at Marshall, but you're still it's still very good numbers. Like, those are great numbers. And I'd like I don't even know if it's possible for, some of these top edges to produce that at Marshall, but I don't deal in hypotheticals or whatever. But I mean, Green probably won't get much playing time to start the year. There's a lot of great edge rush talent, I think, already in Baltimore, and you got some guys with some pending contracts like Owe. But I think this is a great pick for Baltimore. You let him sit for a year. You let him, get some muscle, get some size, develop. Next year, Mike Green could be one of those elite players coming off the edge. Next, we got Emory Jones, tackle out of LSU. Emory Jones, last year was projected to be a top 10 pick in the draft, but obviously didn't happen. But I still think Emory Jones could be a starter in this league, especially if he kicks into guard or if he, stays at right tackle. I think, there is potential for Emory Jones there. Teddy Buchanan, pretty good linebacker. I mean, obviously the linebackers from like Jahad Campbell to Schlesinger, and then there's a line, and obviously the drop off is pretty far. So I think Teddy Buchanan, pretty good pick. Carson Vincent looks to be pretty good. Obviously, FCS guy is going to have to develop immensely to play in the league, so we'll see how that goes. You get Bilal Cone, or Kone, I don't know how to say it, but I think this is great value in the 6th round. This is a great pick. I was a big fan of him at Western Michigan last year. You draft a replacement kicker in case things don't go over well with Justin Tucker, which I don't hate. LeJontay Wester, just adding depth to your receiving core. And I think has a legit potential to play. You look at the, who these receivers have been for the Ravens recently. It's like a guy like Devin Duvernay seeing the field. Like, especially with like LeJontay Wester's skill set, I think has legit potential to play that slot role. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, you have guys like Zay Flowers, but Aeneas Peebles, also a pretty decent pick in the 6th round. I think they did a really good job in the 6th round. But other than that, these top 3 picks alone justify me giving Baltimore an A grade. I think they get an A for this draft. So very big fan of the draft for the Baltimore Ravens. Next, we got the Buffalo Bills. So the Buffalo Bills, you get Maxwell Hairston at, pause that real quick. You get Maxwell Hairston at 30, which I was expecting him to grow to Green Bay much earlier, but I do think that Hairston is a good pick. Like I said, like, the speed is there, and I think he has immense potential. Especially if you look at him, he is a little skinny, I believe, for a corner. You see 183, but very athletic. One of the most athletic corner prospects in this draft. 6.37 prospect grade, but I do think that Maxwell Hairston, you see the 4.28 40, you have 4.2 speed at the corner position. And especially with Hairston's eyes as a ball hawk, you saw it at Kentucky last year and the season before. Hairston really has good potential to be a good ball hawk cornerback too for the Bills, which is a need for the Bills. I mean, you see it, there it is. Like, this top needs cornerback. I mean, the depth is already shaky, and you address it with Maxwell Hairston. Next, I really like the pick. Next, you get TJ Sanders, which to me is a bit of a reach. Obviously, he's not going to be like an every down kind of player for Buffalo, in my opinion, but you need depth at defensive tackle, so can't hate the pick. And he's a part of a great D-line at South Carolina. So next, you get Landon Jackson in the 3rd round. Landon Jackson in the 3rd round, absolute steal. This guy's 6'7", I believe. 6'6", 6'7", immense, the weight, the athleticism, 85, ran a 4.6, 40.5 vert, and then a 10.9 broad jump. I mean, I think that Landon Jackson could be, coming off the edge next season and looking great for Buffalo, especially if he has a good camp. Next, we got Deion Walker, which is another pick I really like. Deion Walker, he was another guy who last season was projected to go in the first round, but, fell because of a lackluster 2024. But his team was also awful, right? And Deion Walker still had great production, I think, at Kentucky. So I'm a big fan of the Deion Walker pick. I think Deion Walker probably has more of a chance to see the field than TJ Sanders, in my opinion, especially on running downs. Deion Walker needs to be on the field. Pairing him with Ed Oliver is just elite, especially in the run stop. I mean, who will be able to run against that interior with Deion Walker if Deion Walker is, as great potential-wise as he is, as it's said he is. Next, you get Jordan Hancock, cornerback out of Ohio State. Obviously just a depth piece here. And, you see a lot of corners like Dorian Strong, who I really like out of Virginia Tech, and then Jackson Halls out of Georgia Tech, who will just kind of be a tight end 3, blocking tight end kind of guy for you. So I don't hate that pick at all. So overall, I give the Bills an A- because the TJ Sanders pick, like it would be an A if they picked someone else other than TJ Sanders. But the Landon Jackson in the 3rd round, Deion Walker in the 4th round, Maxwell Harrison, I love this draft. This is one of my favorites. So give me the Buffalo Bills. Give them an A-. Next, we got the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers, instead of going Jalen Walker like it was said they were, they go with Ted McMillan, which is a great pick. I think 8 was a pretty good landing spot for Ted McMillan. I could see him anywhere from that 7 to 12 kind of range. So Ted McMillan at 8 is a good pick. I'm a big fan of Ted McMillan. I think he was the best wide receiver in this class if you're not counting Travis Hunter. But, you get another wide receiver, especially a big body one at that. You see the height and weight, 6'4", 220 pretty much. And, I think he'll be a great down the field target for Bryce Young, which Bryce Young needs, right? You have guys like Adam Thielen, who isn't great at stretching it down the field. Xavier Legette looked shaky when he was going down the field. And your best deep threat option, I think, last year was either Jalen Coker or David Moore, which is not ideal, right? So getting Ted McMillan, I think, definitely fills a spot on your offense, and I think it's a great pick by Carolina. Next, you get I'm gonna do both of these in the same realm as 2 edge rushers. Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, which had great production 2 years ago at Purdue, then transferred to Texas A&M. Obviously, you lost some of that production because you look at that that Texas A&M defensive line. It was Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner. Like that Texas A&M defensive front was really good. So, obviously I think you're going to see the production dip, but I do really like Nick Scorton, especially for the value of the pick. I like Nick Scorton here. Next, we got Princely Umalan. I can't even say it. Umanmielen. Sorry. Obviously, there's some character issues, but apparently Princely killed it in interviews, during the Combine, Pro Day, whatever. So that's really good. And then he ends up a round 3 pick. And I think round 3 for Princely is pretty good value. I can't hate it. And I think we'll probably see the field. But I think both Scorton and Princely will both see the field next year. There's not a lot in the way of them seeing it. So I am a big fan of these 2 picks. I think, your first 3 picks, you got 3 starters right here pretty much. Next, you got Trevor Etienne. And Trevor Etienne, it's going to depend on the Panthers depth chart, right? You look at the Panthers depth chart real quick. Let me pull it up. You look at the Panthers depth chart right now, and it's, you have Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Trevor Etienne, Jonathan Brooks, and Amani Bailey, and Raheem Blackshear and Karen Lynch-Adams. But anyways, you're not going to see Jonathan Brooks next season. Rico Dowdle, is not a great receiving back. And, are you really going to count on any of these guys down here? Not really. So I think Trevor Etienne, as a receiving back, especially for next season, could see the field a lot. Obviously there's going to be packages for him as a receiving back. But, Chuba Hubbard's going to be the main guy. But I think Trevor Etienne, there is a chance he sees the field. Next, you get Latham Ransom out of Ohio State, and also really good safety in this class, really good value at the 4th round. And I think Latham Ransom, super athletic corner, right? Or safety, sorry. And the pick makes a lot of sense. So I'm a big fan of the Lathan Ransom pick here. Super athletic, could be a Kyle Hamilton kind of guy in the future. I don't think he has that much potential, but kind of think a mini Kyle Hamilton when you think of a guy like Lathan Ransom. And the rest of these picks, kind of just fillers. Excuse me. I'm not really a big fan of any of them in a crazy way, but obviously you get more receiver depth here, you get more tight end depth with Mitchell Evans, and he's also a pretty good blocker, and then more D tackle depth with Cam Jackson. But overall, I'd give this draft probably a B plus B. Definitely the second best draft in the NFC South, in my opinion. So I'd give it a pretty good rating of B plus, somewhere in that range. Next, we got the Bears. And the Bears had an interesting draft, right? Obviously, it's Colston Loveland. And people were hyping up this pick a lot and saying how good it was. And I do think that Loveland is a good pick if Warren wasn't available, right? Like, in my opinion, Loveland and Kmet, play the same game, right? You're not really going to see Loveland doing much. He's going to be like a power slot kind of guy, which I guess is what Ben Johnson is looking for. But you're also picking Luther Burden, pretty much play the same role, which it does make it dynamic, right? It does make your offense more dynamic. But personally, your offense would be even more dynamic with Tyler Warren. Like, Tyler Warren is an elite pick. Like, it would have been a great pick at 10 for the Bears. But I don't get this. Like, I don't get drafting Warren or drafting Loveland over Warren. It just doesn't make much sense to me for how great Warren is as a prospect. So yeah, I don't really understand a Colston Loveland pick. And still, Colston Loveland is plenty talented. He's uber talented. Like, he was the top, I think, 7 guy on my big board for a reason. So really and truly, you're getting a good tight end. But I just think that Warren was just a better pick, in my opinion. But Luther Burden, pretty good. We all know Luther Burden, my wide receiver too, if we're not counting Travis Hunter, of course. But, I really like Luther Burden, and I think he'll fit in nicely, especially as a wide receiver 3 slot guy by Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. Trapilo looks to be a starter at some point, so good on them for that. And then you get Shamar Turner at the end of the second round as well with your 4th pick. And I really like Shamar Turner. I think this pick will work out very well for Chicago, especially because defensive tackle is a pretty big need for you at Chicago. So I'm a big fan of this pick. The rest of the draft, it's not great. Zoff Frazier could be something, though. If you look at any of these guys in the later picks, Zoff Frazier looks to be very interesting. 4.36, 40, 6'3". So, obviously the cornerback room is already pretty loaded at Chicago, in my opinion. So, maybe we'll see him, maybe not. But I think Zoff Frazier, especially if he has to wait a couple years, could be really good. So Chicago, I will give them a B minus. B minus for Chicago. Sorry, I had to check my notes there. Next, we get the Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals. Yikes. This draft is not great. Especially you have 6 picks, and I don't really think you really, got the ball out of the park in any of these picks, right? You get, Shamar Stewart. And I really like Shamar Stewart, especially as a prospect. Athletically, he looks amazing. The athletic score is going to be insane here, 84. And he is going to be great, right? I think he does have legit potential. The size, 6'5", 260, really slimmed down and is going to slide into that edge role. But I do think, it was a good pick. I do like the Shamar Stewart pick. But the rest of the picks were just kind of, they didn't really move the needle for me, right? You get Demetrius Knight Jr., who I kind of think is a reach, especially round 2, pick 17. Obviously, the linebackers available, there was a steep drop-off, and maybe there were better ones available. Guys like maybe Smile London or something. But Demetrius Knight Jr., I don't really agree with this pick. I do like the Dylan Fairchild pick, obviously, go Dogs. But, you don't really need a guard, right? Maybe you do. I guess you do, yeah. But I just, once again, I feel like there are better guards available. Barrett Carter has a lot of potential. I think, had a very quietly good year last year for Clemson. So I like the Barrett Carter pick, but the rest of these picks don't really move anything for me. So, I'll give this one like a C, honestly. Like it's not great. And for the amount of picks that you have to kind of be great in that position. So I'll give Shamar Stewart and Barrett Carter are kind of carrying this draft, in my opinion. Next, we got the Browns. The Browns probably had the most interesting draft of, this whole year. So you trade out of pick 2, you go to pick 5. And in my opinion, trading down from 2, getting Mason Graham is great. Mason Graham, by far the best defensive tackle in this class, best run stopper by far. And you get great value, right? Trading back. I think you get the Jack's first for next year and a couple other picks for them. So, you get the round 2 pick and you get the round 4 pick, right? And then you get the first from next year, which is immense value. And I think you did a great job turning around those Jacksonville picks, right? You get Quinshon Judkins. You get Dylan Sampson with those picks. So, really and truly, I think they did a great job on the trade back. I think the trade back was a great idea. Obviously, I think that you needed a lot if you're the Cleveland Browns. I think they needed literally everything, right? QB, O-line, edge, running back, wide receiver, literally every skill position that you need, they needed them. So I do really like trading back for Mason Graham. You're pairing Mason Graham, a great run stopper, who's pretty much going to replace what Dalvin Tomlinson was last year, right? And maybe even be better. And you already have Myles Garrett, of course, coming off the edge, so that's great. Then you get Carson Schlesinger with the first pick in the second round, which I love. Carson Schlesinger, was one of those top 2 linebackers that I liked, between Jahad Campbell and Schlesinger. And some people are arguing that Schlesinger would be better than Campbell. I don't think so, but Schlesinger is great. Schlesinger is a great linebacker out at UCLA. We'll definitely see the field next year. Next, you got Quinshon Judkins. Quinshon Judkins was probably I forget what I had him in my running back tier or my running back ranking, but he quickly rose to a top 5 guy at some point for me. So I love the Quinshon Judkins pick at pick 4. He was better than TreVeyon Henderson in my opinion. He's just more of that classic running back. He's got great size, right? For a running back, you look at him. He's like 6 foot 220, right? I'll take that. 92 athleticism. He ran a 4.48. But he's the ability to bounce off the contact and be a great runner, despite lacking the speed. So I really like Quinshon Judkins a lot. Next, you get Harold Fannin, my favorite tight end in this class. So, they're picking pretty much the guys I really like, right? So you get Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end, and it's going to be interesting to see how they play him. I think there is potential for him to start next year, or maybe not start, but, get playing time for sure. It just depends how they use him. I think, using him in 12 personnel will be interesting. I don't think you'll be able to run the ball much with Harold Fannin Jr. as a blocker. He's more of a receiving type. But having him in the slot and seeing what he can do, I think will definitely, be good for him. Especially, using him how Bowling Green did. I think, especially with a nickel corner, it's a mismatch, in my opinion. So I like Harold Fannin Jr. here a lot. Next, you pick Dillon Gabriel. We'll come back to this pick in a second, but Dylan Sampson, like I said, you're lacking speed with Quinshon Judkins. You pick up speed in Dylan Sampson. You look at Dylan Sampson here, 5'8", 200 pounds, and he didn't record a 40, but I think his 40 was 4.2. So I really like Dylan Sampson a lot, maybe 4.3. But I do like Dylan Sampson to complement Quinshon Judkins. I think these two together could be a dangerous duo, really and truly. At the end of we're going to look back in a couple years and be like, holy cow, that's actually a really good duo. So hopefully that pans out for both of them. But obviously, you also draft Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So here's what I think, right? You get Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, which is kind of crazy in the 3rd round, in my opinion. I mean, guys were starters were drafted in the 3rd round in 2020, that Kenny Pickett class, right? Dillon Gabriel is not going to be a starter. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe he proves me wrong. I mean, he is the NFL or the college football leader in passing touchdowns, and that's I think 2nd in passing yards. And, he's kind of like every team he's gone to, he's been a leader for that team. But I guess we'll just have to see it with Dillon Gabriel, right? I don't really know if I believe in it. So we're just going to see how it goes with Dillon Gabriel. And I think Dillon Gabriel is better than Shedeur Sanders? No way. And that's why it really doesn't make sense for me. Because if you're the Browns and Shedeur is falling, and you're going to pick him at some point, why are you picking Dillon Gabriel? You know what I'm saying? I feel like it's a waste of a pick. And that's like the big issue with this draft, in my opinion, is you're wasting a pick. And the Browns need a lot. You need a receiver. This round 3 pick 94 would be great for a receiver. Like, let's look at it real quick. Let me go to the draft. So we look at round 3, right? Let's go to round 3. You go down. So let's look at some guys. Ty Felton, great receiver out of Maryland. I really like. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were guys available. Obviously, Savion Williams goes off the board a little bit earlier. But in the 4th round, even, there were good wide receivers getting picked. Jameer Dike, Dante Thornton, Arian Smith was still available. Like, they were guys. Jalen Lane, who was very underrated in my opinion. Jalen Royals, standout from Utah State. Elik Ayomanor. Like, there were great receivers available at this pick. And I think, missing out on a receiver to pick Dillon Gabriel is awful decision making. So that's the only thing that holds me back on this. So I'll give the Browns a B+. Next is the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys, with their first pick, picked Tyler Booker. And it's such a Cowboys pick, right? You got Tyler Guyton and Tyler Smith the past 2 years, and both are looking like they're going to pan out. Guyton needs some work, but Tyler Smith has been looking like a home run. And then you get Tyler, you got the Tyler crew, right? So I don't hate the Tyler Booker pick. I think it was a little high value-wise, but he's like arguably the best guard in this class. And, obviously Zach Martin retired, so you're filling a hole. You're filling a hole, but you're reaching doing it. But, if anyone can develop a guard, it's the Dallas Cowboys, in my opinion. Next, I think you did really good with the next 5 or the next 3 or 4 picks, right? You get Ezra-Raku, who I was high on all draft. And, I've talked about him in all my mock drafts. I had him going in the first round, but you get him at round 2, pick 12. So I like that for Donovan Ezra-Raku. I think that's a great fit. Next, you get Siobhan Ravel in the 3rd round. Great pick, great value, and that's what I was talking about earlier with the injuries to the corners and them falling. Siobhan Ravel was a projected 1st rounder last year because, he was just that great at Eastern Carolina. Obviously, got hurt, didn't play at all this season. So I think that, Siobhan Ravel could be, the sneaky hidden gem of this class. Maybe not even sneaky hidden gem, but people are going to be looking back and be like, why did we let him fall this far? So Siobhan Ravel is a guy I'm super high on. Next, you get Jaden Blue in the 5th round, which is kind of interesting to me because Jaden Blue is a very good receiving back. But can you justify a round 5 pick on a really good receiving back? I don't really think so. I mean, in the 5th round, there were pretty good running backs available in the 5th round, in my opinion. You got, DJ Giddens is available. And I feel like as a, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you shouldn't be focusing on trying to find a receiving back, right? DJ Giddens was a great prospect. Devin Neal was Ollie Gordon. Devin Neal, right? Devin Neal should have gone here. Devin Neal could have competed for the starting job in Dallas, in my opinion, if Dallas were to go for Devin Neal. But Jaden Blue, it's an okay pick. And then Shamar James out of linebacker out of Florida, pretty good. Phil Maffa, I think some of these guys will see the rotation, especially in that running back room. Who knows what's going to happen out of that? I mean, the running backs right now, it's Javonte Williams, it's Deuce. Hold on, we can look right now, actually. But, there's not a lot of great guys, right? You got Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders, Phil Maffa, and Deuce Vaughn, right? Not great options. So, we'll just have to see who comes out, in this running back room. But in terms of the draft, I'll give the Cowboys a B. Next, we got the Broncos. Broncos also had a pretty interesting draft that I kind of really like. So, Broncos, first pick, get Jahdae Barron. And it's like the rich get richer, right? Jahdae Barron, home run of a pick. Already adding to a stacked secondary between PS2, Riley Moss, and Talanga Hafunga. I don't know how to say his name. Hafunga from San Francisco you bring in to be safety. And then you got Jahdae Barron, who you can put at corner or safety. Very versatile pick, plug and play kind of guy. Great pick. Love the pick at 20. Great pick. One of my favorites. Then you get RJ Harvey at the end of the second round. And I really like RJ Harvey. People, are going to doubt him. And I think, RJ Harvey wasn't a popular pick at running back, especially with the guys available. Obviously you had your Ashton Jeanties, you had your Caleb Johnsons, you had your Amarion Hamptons, but RJ Harvey quietly had a really good season. And if I'm not mistaken, RJ Harvey was a guy I was very high on, one of my favorite running back prospects in this draft. But, it's like I was a pretty big believer in a guy like RJ Harvey. He was my number 10 running back, but I don't hate this. As a guy who can receive out the backfield. He is also a very hard-nosed runner. He's really short, which benefits you as a running back, and he's got great contact balance. So I'm a big fan of RJ Harvey. It could be a reach. It definitely could be a reach, especially when a guy like Caleb Johnson was still on a board, or maybe a guy like Cam Scadaboo. But I do think RJ Harvey, goes to a really good team. I think there's a lot of promise here. Next, you get the Pat Bryant pick, which I'm not a big fan of. I think there are better receivers available. I do like Savion Jones, though, out of LSU. I think that this could be a really good pick to go with it. I think this guy, he could have potential to be a starter, especially off the edge for the Denver Broncos. The rest of the draft is not really interesting. Maybe Caleb Warner, is a guy who didn't play he only played 1 year of college football and switch from basketball, so we'll see how it turns out. But I'll give it a B+ because I actually do kind of really like their draft. Next is the Detroit Lions, which it's such a Dan Campbell draft, but it just doesn't light the world on fire. Every one of these picks was a reach. Tyleik Williams was a reach. I mean, this guy was projected second, third rounder, right? Tate Ratledge, also a projected third rounder. But, I really like the Tate Ratledge pick. I think Tate Ratledge will start right away for for the Detroit Lions, especially with how Dan Campbell coaches. I think Tate is a very similar player to how Campbell coaches. Isaac TeSlaa from Arkansas, in my opinion, wasn't the best Arkansas receiver even in the draft. Armstrong was the UDFA, he's so good. I think Armstrong's going to be a hit where he goes, or I forget where he went. But Isaac TeSlaa, don't really agree with the pick here. This is also a reach in my opinion. Miles Frazier has potential. Ahmad, I don't know, he's Egyptian. But anyways, edge from Boise State. Had a pretty productive season last year. I don't hate this pick at all. I think this is actually a really good pick. And having him play opposite of Aiden Hutchinson could be really interesting in the future. Obviously, I gotta love this pick. Dan Jackson, safety out of Georgia. I mean, talk about a Dan Campbell guy. Give me Dan Jackson. I really like this pick. And I think out of any team, this is the team he could really start for, honestly, is Dan Campbell's Lions. It makes so much sense to me, especially if he could develop, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. But the Detroit Lions, I'll give them a C+, just because they've reached on so many picks and it was kind of insane. Next is the Packers. Not really a great class, in my opinion. You get Matthew Golden at 23. Here's the thing. To me, they really didn't address their needs. Obviously, maybe a downfield receiver is a need. And I think Matthew Golden and Savion Williams kind of both address that. But is it more important than your cornerback? I don't think so. Obviously, you have guys who are okay. You have Romeo Doubs. You have Dontavion Wicks. You have Christian Watson. Watson's been played by the injury bug. Dontavion Wicks doesn't have hands. And Romeo Doubs hasn't really panned out how you wanted him to. So you get Matthew Golden, but I don't like the pick. I just think cornerback was the move here. Even like a Hairston, and even in the second round, maybe addressing cornerback. I mean, guys like Siobhan Ravel was still on the board. We could look at round 2. You have guys like Will Johnson still on the board, right? You have no, never mind. They weren't on the board. Sorry. Anyways, but still, you have Trey Amos. You have Makuba out of Texas, who is more of a safety, but still a need. And then, Darian Porter out of Iowa State, who is really good. Azaria Thomas, Siobhan Ravel. There were good corners available around that pick for the Packers, and they just didn't take them, which is why I'm not very high on this class. I think Savion Williams does have pretty good potential. You just got to figure out how you would play him. Matthew Golden is purely just going to be a deep threat kind of guy, and with your pick 23 in round 1, I don't think it's necessary. Anthony Belton, in my opinion, is a reach at tackle, especially if a guy like Emory Jones was available. And none of these other guys I think are really difference makers in my opinion. Maybe Micah Robinson, but he's a round 7 pick and I think a really short corner. I mean, had production in college, but he's 5'11", 184. Is he really going to be your cornerback too? No, he's not. And so I think if you're a Packers fan, you have a lot to be desired from this class. So I'll give this one a C-, honestly. It just was not great. Next, we got the Houston Texans. Houston Texans, didn't have a first-round pick this year, traded out of it with, I forget who it was, but they traded out. But you get Jaden Higgins, who I'm a big Jaden Higgins fan. This is the tall guy out of Iowa State, 6'4", He's going to be a deep threat kind of guy for them. And do you really need it with Nico Collins? I don't know. Obviously, it's nice to have deep threat receivers, but I think a slot receiver was more in tune. But obviously, you see here at round 3, pick 15, you get your teammate, Jalen Noel, who I liked better than Jaden Higgins. But Jalen Noel is probably going to start in the slot for the Houston Texans this year, honestly, in my opinion. We look at the NFL depth charts. Let's go to the Houston Texans, if I can find them. But you look at the depth chart. I forgot they have Christian Kirk. But anyways, it's just not great, right? John Mechie, once upon a time was going to be a great receiver. But I think, Jaden Higgins could play this role. I think Christian Kirk could play this, other wide receiver role. And, you can start a Jalen Noel. I think there's a legitimate chance Jalen Noel sees the field. You get Ariante Ursary, tackle out of Minnesota. This is also a great pick. Ariante Ursary was kind of a fringe first-round kind of guy. And I think you get good value for the pick here. I think this is probably around where he's slotted to go. So I really like the Ariante Ursary pick. You get Jalen Smith, corner out of USC. Not really a great pick in my opinion. I think there are better corners available. But you get Woody Marks, running back out of USC. I really like Woody Marks. I think Woody Marks had a very productive season last year. Kind of a very silent running back. I didn't have him in my top 10 running backs, but this class was just so loaded that, Woody Marks has a legit chance. I've said it before, there are 15 guys I think that could make an impact in this class, and Woody Marks is one of them. You get Jalen Reed out of Penn State. This is a very underrated pick. I don't get the Graham Mertz pick in the 6th round. The rest of these guys are kind of just depth pieces maybe. But I think that your top, especially for trading out of the 1st round, you kind of did a pretty good job addressing your needs. You get Ursary, who fills your tackle need. But, and you get the wide receiver need down with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, who are both teammates. So I can't hate. I'll probably give this draft a B+, honestly. I really like the Houston Texans draft. Next, we got the Indianapolis Colts. And the Indianapolis Colts, the one time I change it in my mock draft, they get Tyler Warren. I really like the Tyler Warren pick. This is a home run, A+ pick. And then you get JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State, the edge. I really like this pick as well. I don't know if he's as good as Nick Squirton, in my opinion, but I think that Tuimoloau at this range is pretty good value for the pick. So I really like him coming off the edge for the Indianapolis Colts. And then past that, it's not much, right? You get DJ Giddens to be a backup running back, Riley Leonard to be a backup quarterback. You're going to make him what's his name 2.0, Daniel Jones 2.0, I guess. But other than that, like this class is not that impressive. But the Tyler Warren picks and Tui Muawau picks are very good, so I'll give it like a C plus. Not much to say for the Indianapolis Colts, unfortunately. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Wow. No one expected them to trade up for Travis Hunter. And if Travis Hunter is the player he's meant to be, I mean, this is a great pick, right? This is a great trade up for them. And I think it could be a huge win, especially for the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. But you get Caleb Bransall in the third round, sorry. And I think this is a great pick. I was such a big Caleb Bransall fan. Once again, I think one of those shorter corners, but yeah, 5'11", but he's got the size, like, and he's very athletic, right? So I really like Caleb Ransom as a corner, or Caleb Bransall, sorry. But I think this is a great pick, great value in the third round, especially at the end of the third round. I really like Caleb Bransall. And then you get Wyatt Milam with the next pick. I really like Wyatt Milam. He was, once again, a guy who was projected to be in the first round, but fell because of guys like, Bray Zabel being selected. But I do like Wyatt Milam. And then you get Baishal Tootin out of Virginia Tech, one of my honorable mentions. Very good, speedy running back, great receiving back. We'll see what his role is. Obviously they have Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, so it's going to be interesting to see Baishal Tootin. Jack Kaiser, really good linebacker out of Notre Dame. I think he leads Notre Dame all time in tackles. So I think this is a great pick for the value at round 4, pick 5. And then, Rayon Lane, the third, for safety out of Navy, another great pick. And LeQuint Allen, obviously in round 7, I don't know if he makes the team or not. But I think, these 3 picks are very solid. And I think the Jack Kaiser pick is also very solid. So I would give Jacksonville Jaguars a B on their draft. I think they did a very good job. A lot of it depends on Travis Hunter. If Travis Hunter is elite and great and a generational prospect, then it's like an A. But for now, I'll give it a B plus kind of grade. Next, we got the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City, holy cow. They honestly killed it in the draft this year, which is so annoying to say. Like, as a Kansas City hater, this is so annoying to say. But really and truly, there's not a bad pick here. Josh Simmons at 32. Great pick. I mean, one of the best tackles in this class. A-plus pick. Omar Norman Lott at the end of the second round. He's not going to play every down as a defensive tackle, but he looks great against the run. I think rushing the passer. Sorry, he looks great rushing the passer. Getting confused on my prospects here. But Omar Norman Lott, this is like another A-plus pick. Ashton Gillott, very underrated edge out of Louisville. Kind of gets overshadowed by the other guys in this draft. Another great pick. Noel Williams, one of my favorite corners in this class, goes here. And then Jalen Royals, another wide receiver I really liked out of Utah State. And then Rashard Smith in the 7th round. This is just a great draft. This is A+. Unfortunately, this is an A+ draft. Which I hate to say it, but this is an A+ draft. Next is the Las Vegas Raiders. You get Ashton Jeanty, one of those blue chip prospects in my opinion. You get Jack Besh out of TCU, which is a pick I really like personally. People forget that, Jack Besh led the LSU Tigers in receiving yards in 2022. People forget that, or 2023, sorry. You get a good corner in Darian Porter. We'll have to see how he plays. Obviously, let me take a look at the depth chart here for the Raiders. But you have a lot of needs, right? But you have who am I thinking of? I don't know who I was thinking of, but they have a lot of needs. Any pick is a pretty decent pick for them. Charles Grant is an interesting one in the 3rd round. I don't know if that's worth it. I'm not a big fan of the Dante Thornton pick, in my opinion. I think he's just a certified deep bomb. J.J. Pegues could be an interesting pick, though. And then you get Tommy Mellott, who they're converting to wide receiver out of Montana State. And Cam Miller. Cam Miller, let's say the Raiders are bad and, Geno Smith sucks. Cam Miller has a chance to play football if Geno Smith is not good. And especially in a couple years when Geno Smith is out, if the Raiders don't draft anyone, Cam Miller is a guy who could see the field. But obviously, I think Jack Besh is going to be the most impactful guy out of this list of players. Sorry, scratch that. Ashton Jeanty, obviously. But I think these first three picks are very good. And I think you do get some pretty good guys down here, and JJ Pegues and Cam Miller. But other than that, it's like Dante Thornton, better receivers available. Tonka Hemingway was just kind of he was in a really good situation. And some of these picks are not great. So I'll give the Raiders I'll give them a B, just because these three players, alone kind of carry this class. Los Angeles Chargers. Los Angeles Chargers had a pretty good draft, honestly, all things considered. You get Omarion Hampton with your first overall pick, which is, or your first round pick, sorry. And Omarion Hampton was a guy I thought was going to go in the first round, and he did. So I'm a big fan of the Omarion Hampton pick. I love it, especially with, how, what's his face coaches, what's his name? Harbaugh. With Harbaugh coaching, Omarion Hampton is going to see the field, and he's going to be nasty, and I love it. Trey Harris, great pick. Especially, you look at this Chargers team, it's not, the wide receiver room really and truly is wide open, right? Obviously, you have Quentin Johnson, who hasn't been great. You bring back Mike Williams, who wasn't great last year, but now you have Trey Harris. Now you have Keandre Lambert-Smith. Now you have Omarion Hampton. And Omarion Hampton should be the starter for this team. And then Trey Harris also is definitely going to see the field on this team. Jamari Caldwell, defensive tackle was a need, but is he starting over a guy like T.R. Tart? I don't know. We'll have to see. But Kyle Kennard, once again, kind of a victim of the circumstance at South Carolina. I'm very weary about these South Carolina defensive players. They get a lot of hype, but I don't know if they're going to be enough to, be starters. Keandre Lambert-Smith had a very productive year at Auburn last season, especially with lackluster QB play. So I think this is, low-key, I really like the KLS pick. A lot of people have been hating on it, but I do think, once again, is this a guy who could see the field, especially getting in the 5th round when you're looking for depth pieces. I'm a big fan of this pick. Then you got Oronde Gadsden, the second tight end out of Syracuse. He's going to be very good backup for them, or even, could be a guy that cracks a rotation. Dissely and Conklin are not great tight ends. And if Gadsden has a great camp, and who's to say he won't get time? But RJ Mickens in the back end, I think, is a very valuable pick here. So overall, I'll give the Chargers draft an A-. I really like this class. I think they did a very good job. Next, we got the Rams. The Rams did a very good job, in my opinion, especially trading back, getting Terrence Ferguson. He fills a hole, pretty much. Obviously, it's not the biggest need in the world, and there were very good tight ends available. So this pick is kind of a reach, in my opinion. I think there are better tight ends available, but I'm not going to hate against what McVay does. You get Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, who's a pretty decent edge. You get Jarquez Hunter in round 4, which, he's going to be a backup anyway, so it's a very interesting pick. Ty Hamilton, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. I actually do like this pick for the value. You get, I think this is Chris Paul Jr. technically, but I don't know why they have it as Pooh Paul Jr. It's got to be a joke, right? Pooh Paul Jr. But I do like Chris Paul Jr. in the 5th round. I think this is their best pick out of their whole class. And I do like Kanata Mumfield a lot as well. But overall, this is not a great class. Chris Paul Jr. being your best pick and it's your 5th rounder is not ideal. So I'd give this is a C-. This might be a D, to be honest. This is just not a great class in my opinion. But I do like Chris Paul Jr. That is the crown jewel. I'll give that one a D. It's pretty rough. Miami's another team that had a very not bad but not great draft class, right? You get Kenneth Grant at pick 13, which I think there are better defensive tackles like Walter Nolan. I think Walter Nolan could have gotten here very well. Obviously, you need to replace what's his name, Christian Wilkins, but Kenneth Grant, I don't know if that's the guy to do it. You trade up for Jonah Savainia, but at pick 37, he was barely in my top 50 big board, or he was just outside of it, and you traded up to get him. I don't really agree with that pick either. I think there are better options. You didn't have to trade up, in my opinion. You get Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle out of Maryland. This is a pretty decent pick. I do like the Jordan Phillips pick, especially for round 5 value. I do like this Jordan Phillips pick. I do also like Dante Trader Jr. Very underrated defense at Maryland between these guys. You get Ollie Gordon in the 6th round, which I think could have a legitimate chance to see the field, especially with Achane just being more of a receiver, elusive back kind of guy. Ollie Gordon to be more of a power back. I think there's a legit chance Ollie Gordon sees the field. I don't agree with drafting Quinn Ewers, and Zeke Biggers is a pretty decent pick in the 7th round, but overall not a great class. C minus, like it's just not great. It's not that good. Next we got the Minnesota Vikings, and the Minnesota Vikings. Luckily this one will be quick. They had 5 picks, and they did pretty good. Donovan Jackson is a guy who's going to see the field. He wasn't the best, I think in terms of guards, guard classes this week, and I don't agree with taking one in the 1st round. But, their next pick was not until the 3rd round. So are you going to wait till the 3rd round to get a guard? No. So yes, you're going to reach on Donovan Jackson, but he won't, he's going to be good. Then you get Ty Felton in the 3rd round, which I like Ty Felton as a receiver. I think he's very talented. And, having him as a potential wide receiver 3, just getting J.J. McCarthy weapons is a big deal. Next, you get TID, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins out of Georgia. Probably one of the most athletic defensive tackles in this class. People don't realize it. He, athleticism tied 2nd for defensive tackles. 83, ran a 4.86 40 at D tackle. Pretty elite stuff. I really like this pick. And then Kobe King and Gavin Bartholomew are not going to be, great. But Gavin Bartholomew, I think, is a guy who, could be a very good depth piece for them. And then Kobe King, who knows? Probably just another depth piece. But these 3 picks alone are very good. So I'll give the Vikings draft a B. I do like those picks a lot. Next, we got the New England Patriots, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this is an A. You get Will Campbell Jr., or I don't know why I said Jr., but you get Will Campbell. We are going over time a little bit, but this show is going to take a little longer anyways. But at round 1, pick 4, you get Will Campbell. Great pick. Love this pick so much. It was going to be either him or the guy from Missouri. Gosh, why am I blanking on his name? The Jets picked him. You guys know who I'm talking about. But it was either him or Will Campbell. Then you get Travion Henderson. A little bit of a reach in my opinion. But, we'll have to see how he plays. In terms of depth chart right now, he's projected to be the starter over Ramondre, which, the running back core for New England was not very good last year anyways. Ramondre was not great. Antonio Gibson was not great. So I wouldn't be surprised if Travion Henderson is a starter, but it's definitely going to be a committee in my opinion. But Travion Henderson is a pretty decent pick at the spot. Kyle Williams, great pick. Home run pick at round 3. Kyle Williams is going to be a great receiver. He could be the best one in this class, in my opinion. Next, you get Jared Wilson at center. Home run of a pick again. This is a great pick. This is a guy who probably, he was kind of a leader next to Tate Ratledge on that Georgia offensive line. I'm a big fan of Jared Wilson. Put him at guard, put him at center. He's going to fill needs on the Patriots lineup. I don't know why I keep doing that. I can just do this. But he's going to play. You have him here as a backup center, but I think he can swing out to left guard or right guard if you need to, or he can definitely be your center of the future. Then you get Joshua Farmer at defensive tackle out of Florida State. Then you get Braden Swinson, edge out of LSU. Both of these guys for the value are very good. Pick 35 in round 4, pick 8 in round 5. Very good value here. I don't necessarily agree with the long snapper or kicker picks, but I think really and truly, Will Campbell is a hit. Travion Henderson is a hit. Kyle Williams is a hit. Jared Wilson is a hit. Joshua Farmer is a hit. Braden Swinson is a hit. 6 hits, and you have a ton of picks. So overall, I have to give this draft an A for the New England Patriots. They did a great job. Next, we got the New Orleans Saints, who really didn't light the world on fire with their draft, but they got some hits. You have Kelvin Banks Jr., who is a projected first-round guy, obviously, and some had him in the top 10, some didn't. It just depended. But I think I can see the pick in the top 10. I think this makes a lot of sense. Then you get Tyler Shuck. And Tyler Shuck could be a guy, this QB class is not great, and it could be a guy where you're where I wouldn't be surprised if down the road we look back and he's like, oh, wait, Tyler Shuck is probably a top 2 quarterback in this class. Maybe that's crazy to say, but he's probably the most pro-ready quarterback in this class. maybe other than Kyle McCord. He's old, but I think he brings a lot of value to the team. I really like Tyler Shuck. I'm not a big fan of Vernon Broughton here or Jonas Senker, but I love Danny Stutzman at linebacker out of Oklahoma. I love Quincy Riley at corner out of Louisville, and I love Devin Neal. Devin Neal was my second favorite running back in this class, other than Cam Scadaboo. But Devin Neal, great pick. I mean, you're essentially drafting, in my opinion, it's kind of like, what's his name? Who's their starter now? Gosh, I am blanking on the names here. But you're pretty much getting Alvin Kamara 2.0, in my opinion, with Devin Neal. And I think Devin Neal is going to make an impact down the road. I think he's going to be great. So, with these late picks of Devin Neal, Quincy Riley, Danny Stutzman, I think this draft is like a B-, because you're not really addressing your needs greatly, but you're doing a good job. You need a QB, you need a tackle, you need linebacker, you need corner, and you need another running back, in my opinion. So I think it's a great job. I think it's a pretty good class. I just can't, it's not better than Atlanta's at all. Sorry, but B. Next is the Giants. Yikes. I love Abdul Carter pick here. It's going to be interesting to see how they make it work. Are you going to put Abdul Carter back at linebacker? I think so. Because obviously you have Thibodeau, you have Brian Burns, and now you have Abdul Carter. And I think there is a world where they can all coexist in all three. But it's going to be interesting to see. I really don't think you can have all three on the field at the same time. Next, you get trade up for Jackson Dart, and I low-key hate this pick. Just because you trade back into the first round, and you're not giving up much. They really didn't give up much to trade back into the first round for this pick. But Jackson Dart is just, I don't believe in him. I think maybe he gets 2 years at best, like starting. Like, I don't believe in the accuracy. I don't believe in the timing. I don't think Jackson Dart is an NFL player. It's just plain and simple. But next, Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo, getting him in the third round. Obviously, it's pick one, but I think this is a great pick here. Yes, he's an older prospect, but he's still really good. He's going to fill gaps, and he's going to play great. He's going to be behind Sexy Dexy, but in terms of depth, Darius Alexander is great. Then you get Cam Scadaboo, and I think Cam Scadaboo plays this season. Maybe I'm a crazy Cam Scadaboo fan, but he's going to play. Tyrone Tracy as your main back, and then Scadaboo as your RB2. I think it's great. Then you get Marcus Bow. I think it's just Marcus Bow, tackle out of Purdue. He can move, and I can see him, maybe sticking to right, maybe swinging inside to guard. I think Marcus Bow could be a very interesting pick, and I don't hate it, honestly. But I think really and truly, between Bow, Scadaboo, Alexander, and Carter, this is great. The only thing holding you back, in my opinion, is the Jackson Dart pick. So the highest, I'll give it a B+. And if Jackson Dart's good, that's even better. But it's very hard not to give this class an A. Maybe I'll give him an A-. A- for now. We'll have to see how Jackson Dart plays. Next, we got the Jets. The Jets had another class that I really liked. They really addressed all their needs. You look at it. It's O-line, wide receiver, tight end. You look at it. O-line, tight end, wide receiver, corner. They did a really good job. You got Armand Mimbu. There's the name I was forgetting. You get Armand Mimbu, which, great pick, home run. Mason Taylor in the second round, great pick, home run. Azaria Thomas in the third round, great pick, home run. Arian Smith in the fourth round, great pick, home run. These are all great picks. Malachi Moore, if the character concerns, if he can address the character concerns, Malachi Moore is a great pick. Francisco Maliagoa was a great linebacker in Miami. I don't know much about Tyler Barron, but these 6 picks are great. Really and truly, you hit on all 6 of these, in my opinion, especially with the value with Malachi Moore, Francis Maliagoa, Arian Smith, Azaria Thomas, Mason Taylor, and Armand Mimbu. I'm big fans of all 3 of those picks. But I think that I would really like the Jets class. I think the Jets really get an A+ here between these 6 picks. I mean, it's just great. Maliagoa is great. Malachi Moore is great. Arian Smith is great. Azaria Thomas is great. Mason Taylor, I'm just a big fan of that class. He really addressed all your needs in one draft. So I'm a really big fan of the Jets draft. They get an A+ in my opinion. Philadelphia Eagles, the rich get richer once again, right? Jahad Campbell, great pick. Off-ball linebacker, and him falling to Philly is insane to me. That linebacking core is going to be great. You look at it. You look at the linebacking core right now. Let's pull it up. You look at the linebacking core. You have Nakobe Dean, who we don't know if he'll play next season. You have Zach Bond, Jeremiah Trotter, Smile Munden, Jahad Campbell, Nolan Smith, like Azeez Ojulari. Like, there are great guys on this Philadelphia defense, and they just keep getting better. You get Jahad Campbell, you get Andrew Makuba, who is kind of an undershadowed kind of guy with the Texas Longhorns last season, and could be a guy that could see the field. You get Ty Robinson out of Nebraska to fix defensive tackle. I like Ty Robinson a lot. He's going to replace that Milton Williams kind of guy. And then you get Mac McWilliams, cornerback out of UCF. You get Smile Munden, like Drew Kendall. This is a guy with a lot of potential, I think, especially getting drafted to the Eagles, who just produce O linemen and centers. Drew Kendall as a depth piece could be someone interesting we look back seeing. Kyle McCord, obviously, playing backup QB, and Cameron Williams out of Texas. I think a lot of these guys have potential to be really good, and they just kind of hit the ball out of the park. This is like a B+. Just great talent for their picks, especially, picking later. They did a great job with these picks. I really like the Eagles. Next, we got the Steelers. Steeler Nation, rise up. If you're a Steelers fan, this is not really the draft you expected, in my opinion, right? You get Derek Harmon in the first round, which, is not an elite pick by any means. It's not a flashy pick, is what I'm trying to say. People were expecting like Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, whatever. But Derek Harmon is a really good pick, an underrated pick. I think he was a fringe first round kind of guy. Yes, you're reaching a little bit, but I think Derek Harmon has legit potential to develop. This is a guy who led defensive tackles in pressures at Oregon last season, led all of college football at the defensive tackle position in pressures. So I like Derek Harmon going to the Steelers. I think it makes sense, but you're really not really addressing that much of a need. Caleb Johnson is a running back where you address a need. This is a good pick addressing a need and great value at round 3, pick 19. Caleb Johnson was my fourth running back, in my rankings. And I really like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I think the zone run scheme that Pittsburgh runs, he fits perfectly. You get Jack Sawyer. Do you need Jack Sawyer, though? Don't really know. You get Yahya Black. Do you need him as well? Really and truly, you're drafting depth pieces with round 4 and round 5 anyways. So picking Jack Sawyer and Yahya Black does make sense in terms of depth. And then you get Will Howard in the 6th round. I do like the Will Howard pick. In terms of quarterbacks in this class, obviously there weren't a lot of great options in this class, in my opinion. But I do like Will Howard a lot. I think that it does make sense that he goes to Pittsburgh. He has a pretty deep ball. So I think it'll make sense. And will he start right away? No. But do I think he has potential to start later on down the line? Yes, for sure. Especially with Will Howard as a player. Obviously at Kansas State, he was really good. At Ohio State, just won a natty. So I think it's like he has legitimate potential to be, a pretty good quarterback and a pretty good starter for at least a couple years. Other than that, the picks are not really that important. But overall, I don't think it's a bad draft. I don't think you really addressed a lot of needs as the Steelers, though. But you do get a quarterback, you do get a running back, and you get some defensive tackles because that defensive tackle room is getting old. So overall, I'd probably give this class like a C+, honestly. It's not flashy by any means, but it kind of gets the job done. So C+ for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next, we got the 49ers. Now, I really like the 49ers draft. Kind of. It's interesting, right? I kind of like it. I'm a big fan of guys like Upton Stout. I'm a big fan of Mykel Williams. I'm a big fan of Alfred Collins. But, Alfred Collins is not a guy who's going to play every down. He's kind of like, a big nose tackle pretty much. I really like Mykel Williams out of Georgia. Go Dogs, obviously. But Georgia, you need another edge to pair with Nick Bosa. So I love the Mykel Williams pick. He's more athletic, or not more athletic, but he's a bigger edge. He kind of can set the edge very well and is a very good complement, in my opinion, to Nick Bosa. It's going to be very hard to go up against those two. in my opinions. You got Alfred Collins to play as a nose tackle kind of role. Nick Martin was probably like the best player on that Oklahoma State defense from last year, which was not very good. So, it's not really like a great pick in my opinion, but he is one of the better linebackers in this class. Upton Stout, very underrated in my opinion at the corner position, was very good at Western Kentucky last season, and I would not be surprised if he's a guy who sees the starting rotation this year. Upton Stout is one of my sleepers. I really like him. You get Jordan Watkins out of Ole Miss. Don't really know if he's going to see the field. CJ West, I think, will see the field at defensive tackle, more so than Alfred Collins. I really like CJ West out of Indiana. Was kind of the spearhead of that defensive tackle group. And at Indiana, which is really good, really underrated. There's a reason they made the CFP, but I do really like CJ West. But the rest of these picks are not, anything great, but I do really like the top, three. In terms of Mykel Williams, Nick Martin, Upton Stout, Jordan Watkins, Jordan James, obviously, he'll probably turn out great, just like all San Francisco running backs do for some reason. But I do like Jordan Watkins, Upton Stout, and Mykel. So overall, I'd probably, once again, this is like a C+. It's not elite, but it's not the best. Is it happening in chat right now? I haven't been looking, to be honest. Giants on a 2-year heater. GM on fire. GM about to get fired, low-key. Nah, it just depends. If the draft pans out for the New York Giants this year, then they'll be good. But it's like, we'll see. We'll see. Jets best draft in how many years? Probably since the Sauce Gardner draft, right? Yeah, barely 20. I'm a big fan of Azareye'h Thomas. First Philly draft in years, or worse. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be great, though, especially at the 30th pick. But I do think, like, for the value you're getting at those late picks, it's still a pretty good draft for Philly. That is true. Alabama, yeah, I didn't think about that. Wow, Derek Harmon, top 5 player overall. I like that. I honestly like that a lot. I like that a lot. Give me DJ Giddens over their running back. I really like DJ Giddens. I really like it. I don't hate those takes at all. Really and truly, I don't hate those takes at all. But next we got the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks had a really good draft. I love Gray Zabel to Seattle. I think it's great. It makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest need for the Seahawks was offensive line, especially to protect Sam Darnold. I don't agree with the Sam Darnold contract at all. Too expensive, and Sam Darnold sucks under pressure. So Gray Zabel is a great pick for them. Nick Emmanwori, great potential, obviously, athletically insane. We'll have to see how he develops at the safety position for Seattle. But I do really like the Emmanwori pick. Elijah Arroyo, one of those tight ends who is French top 5 tight end. It just depends how you had him. But a lot of people liked Elijah Arroyo. I do as well. I don't know if he'd be even cracking the starting rotation. I'm trying to think who Seattle has at tight end right now. But, excuse me. Yeah, it's Noah Fant. Fant had a really good year last year. Very underrated season from Fant. So could I see him as a tight end 2? Maybe. But Jalen Milroe, obviously, one of the most interesting picks in this draft. It's like, do you think Jalen Milroe is going to be a great quarterback? I don't know. Is he great athletically? Yes. He's extremely gifted at quarterback. But is he going to be better than a lot of guys on this board? I don't know. It just depends how he develops as a quarterback, right? The deep bomb is there. One of the best deep bombs in the class is from Jalen Milroe. Athletically, he can run all over the place. But the other quarterbacky stuff he does is not great. Not a great quarterback when it comes to being a quarterback. So we'll have to see how he develops. Obviously, he's going to sit a few years. So I think that's the best thing to happen for Jalen Milroe. And if it doesn't work out, I do think, he has a potential to play wide receiver. He has potential to play running back or something of that nature, just with how athletically gifted Jalen Milroe is. You get Riley Mills out of Notre Dame. Once again, pretty good defensive tackle out of Notre Dame. Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. Very underrated pick. I love Torrey Horton as a receiver. Big body, go up and get it kind of guy. Was very good 2 years ago at Colorado State. Not as good last year. I think he was dealing with some injuries and stuff. but I really like Torrey Horton a lot out of Colorado State. Other than that, like, this class is not all that in terms of the later round picks. Ricky White III is a very underrated pick. I do like how they went after these group of 5 receivers. I really like Ricky White. I really like Torrey Horton. So I do think they kind of went with the really underground picks later in the draft. But I do like at least Gray Zabel and Nick Emmanwori. I think it kind of carries this class a little bit. But, it's going to be interesting to see how Jalen Milroe pans out. RB in round 7, solid. Yeah, I like Damian Martinez a lot. I think he was really good for Miami last year. It just depends if he's going to see the field. Just because Seattle's running back room is already kind of stacked. Like, you have Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and then Kenny McIntosh was pretty good last year in limited time. So it just depends how many people, or if he sees the field at all. Discuss and rank your top 6 tight ends. Oh, man. Obviously, it's Warren, Loveland. Harold Fannin is number 3 for me. I'm just a big Harold Fannin fan. I think in terms of receiver, he's the best in this class. Gunnar Helm and Mason Taylor, top 5. And then I'd probably put Arroyo at 6. Seattle trading Kenny Walker, which is 1. Warren. Warren's 1. And then Loveland 2. I could see Kenneth Walker getting moved. He wasn't great last year. Slow down. My bad. Warren, you think Warren's a bust? It just depends. He's not a true tight end. He's more of a gadget player than a tight end. And if it translates, if someone can make it work to where the gadget player works at the NFL level, like a Taysom Hill, he's going to be great. Because he's basically Taysom Hill if Taysom Hill was a tight end in college, in my opinion. Like, he can throw the ball, he can run the ball, he can catch the ball. But I guess it just depends what you want from, like, a tight end's perspective. But Tampa Bay had an interesting class. I really like the Benjamin Morrison pick. Obviously, he was hurt. Second hip surgery, so kind of concerning there. On the hip surgery there for Benjamin Morrison, hip surgeries are very hard to come back from, especially as a corner. But you get Jacob Parrish, very underrated corner out of Kansas State. You get David Walker, pretty good edge rusher out of Central Arkansas. Did really good in the FCS. Obviously, you're going to want to see if that translates to the NFL, which, a lot of times it doesn't, but we'll see in David Walker. But you get Elijah Roberts, who I think could see the field this year, and then Tej Johnson out of Oregon. And it's like a slot party, right? You have Chris Godwin, who plays the slot. You have Jalen McMillan, who plays the slot. Emeka Egbuka plays the slot. Tej Johnson plays the slot. You have a ton of slot receivers. So it's very interesting to see how it's all going to work out. Obviously, the Chiefs kind of did something like that and won the Super Bowl once upon a time. But, I don't think Emeka Egbuka should have been a first rounder. He was my wide receiver 3 if we're not including Travis Hunter. But I do like Egbuka. It's going to be, once again, going to be interesting to see how they're deployed, right? Because you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, you have Jalen McMillan, you have Trey Palmer, and now you have Egbuka, you have Tej Johnson, you have a lot of guys on that wide receiver room, or in that wide receiver room for Tampa Bay. So it's going to be very interesting to see. But other than that, I think they did pretty good. I think this is like a B-. I just really like the Benjamin Morrison pick. It's going to be interesting to see how they use Egbuka, Tej Johnson, guys like that. I think that's the most interesting thing that's going to be about it is those guys. I think they did very good with their middle round picks, though. 2 more teams. Tennessee Titans. Whew. We got this. All right. Cam Ward, number 1. QB is going to go number 1, unfortunately. It just had to be Cam Ward, but I'm a big believer in Cam Ward. Most potential in this class for the quarterback room, in my opinion. Out of all the QBs in this class, he has the most potential. I've just been a big Cam Ward fan since Incarnate Word. I remember him committing to Washington State. I remember him committing to Miami. I think Cam Ward's going to be great. Hopefully he can translate into the NFL. Obviously, he's going to have to drop a lot of the college petty stuff that he does, kind of. But I think he does have legitimate upside. I don't really agree with the Oladeo pick out of UCLA. I think there are better edges available. But it was pick 20 in the second round, so I guess it's justifiable. Oladeo was a guy who was projected late second, early third. So I don't hate it. Kevin Winston Jr., that other safety from Penn State, I do like this pick a lot. Those safeties from Penn State were very underrated in my opinion. I don't really like the Chimere DK pick. I just haven't seen enough of him, in my opinion, in 2 years at Florida. Not really, didn't really see much from Chimere DK. But I do love the Gunnar Helm pick. You have Chigo Okonkwo, and now you got Gunnar Helm to be that tight end 2, potentially tight end 1. I really like the Gunnar Helm pick. And then you get Elic Aomanor, one of my favorite wide receivers in this class out of Stanford. Big body, I think has a legitimate chance, to be really good. And you look at this Titans depth chart here. The Tennessee Titans, you have, you already have Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett you bring in. And then you got Elic Aomanor, who I think will get in over a guy like Van Jefferson, hopefully. So I do think you have weapons, and especially in the running back room, right? You get Tony Pollard and you get Tyjae Spears. So I really like those guys a lot. And then you get Jackson Slater, underrated FCS prospect out of Sacramento State. I really like this pick. And then Marcus Harris out of Cal. I like him. Like him and Noel Williams were a great safety duo. So I really like that. So overall, I'd give the Tennessee Titans draft like a B+. I don't agree, or maybe even a B. I don't agree with the Oladeo pick. I don't agree with the DK pick, but I think they hit with Cam Ward, they hit with Kevin Winston Jr., they hit with Gunnar Helm, they hit with Aomanor, and they hit with Marcus Harris. I think those are great picks. B+. And lastly, the Commanders. Let me check chat real quick. He's not top 100. Titans' worst ran franchise since they fired Vrabel. Yeah, no, Titans have been rough the past couple years, especially you reached a conference championship, and I mean you had such a great team between AJ Brown, you had Derrick Henry, you had, even though the Ryan Tannehill at quarterback is not great, you still did a really they went all the way to the conference championship and barely lost. Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, UCLA guy, yeah, but the UCLA has not been great. Or not UCLA, sorry. Tennessee Titans franchise has not been ran great. But it's a step in the right direction, in my opinion, with what's going on with that pick. I mean, obviously Cam Ward was going to go first overall. But I think you got pretty good weapons in Elic Aomanor and Gunnar Helm. And you already have Calvin Ridley, Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard. I think that's a very decent team around them. But, I mean, I don't think they're going to be great by any means. They're not a contender. But I think they could, the wild card spot is definitely in play, especially in a bad division. Like Jacksonville, I'm not confident in Jacksonville. I'm not that confident in the Texans. Why'd you have to do that? Puts mayonnaise in his coffee. That's real. That's so real. I don't blame him. Anyways, the Commanders. Josh Conerly Jr., tackle out of Oregon. I really like Conerly. Once again, French first round kind of guy. Tackle class was loaded this year between Will Campbell, Armand Membu, Conerly, Simmons, Kelvin Banks. I mean, 5 tackles in the first round is a lot. But then you get Trey Amos in the second round. It addresses a need. Cornerback was looking pretty rough. Obviously, you have Lattimore now, but Lattimore was not great last season. And then you get you have Sandestrill, who's pretty good, but you bring in Trey Amos. I think he will see the field. It just depends where. I think Sandestrill could go to the nickel. Trey Amos could go to the left side. We'll see. And it's already a pretty good defense for the Commanders. Yes, you do lose Jonathan Allen, but you bring in Javon Kinlaw, which, it's not a great replacement, but, I think it's you still get guys. Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech, pretty underrated guy. Round 4, we'll see, but I do like Jalen Lane a lot. And then you get Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Talk about an underrated running back in the 7th round. I love JCM. He was originally out of New Mexico State, played great at New Mexico State, transferred to Arizona, played great at Arizona, then ran into some controversy over his eligibility, forced him to go to the draft pretty much. But Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is a very underrated running back out of this class. I really like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and getting him in the 4th round, I love Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in the 7th round. Sorry. So yeah, draft grade, yes. I'd give this class not a lot of picks, but did hit on most of these. So out of I would say this is probably an A-. So yeah, there we go. Draft grades completed. O-line guru. They need defensive end still. Yeah, I do agree. They did not address defensive end, which is why it's not any higher. If they addressed defensive end, it would have been a lot higher. But yeah, do love Jalen Lane. I think Jalen Lane's going to be great. But I do like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. You need to watch the film on him. He's great. And then Josh Conerly is going to be pretty good. So you got time to talk O-line? What do you want to say about O-line? It just have to be quick because I'm already running over a little bit. Will Campbell. I like Will Campbell. Do you think Will Campbell can stay at left tackle? Because I know the big talk is his hands. But I do love Will Campbell. Left tackle or guard? Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think Mimbu is more or less the same. Zero? Zero chance he sticks at left tackle? Or do you think... Short arms, yeah. That's what everyone's saying, the short arms. It's just under that length. And even if he does kick out the guard, I think he'll still be a good guard. It just kind of sucks for protecting the quarterback for the Patriots, for Drake May, I do like Mimbu, though. Mimbu's probably my favorite tackle in this class. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I do love Mimbu, though. Yeah. Mimbu's my favorite tackle, and then probably Josh Simmons there. It just depends with the injury stuff for Josh Simmons. But I do think obviously it was the shin injury, I think, for Simmons. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can come back from that. But if he does, that's a great pick. And he looked good in the pro day anyways. Mimbu and Conerly. I love Mimbu. Mimbu was my number one. But Conerly is also a great pick. The tackle class this year was just loaded. Simmons just a right tackle to you? Yeah, that's fair. I can't blame you. Especially with the injury, it's a lot. But, yeah. My third will shock you. Who is it? Let me know what it is, and then I have to dip out of here. Kelvin Banks, he was top 5 for sure, but I like Simmons more than Banks. But Banks was a guy who was also really high coming into it. Yeah, I do think Jonas. Yeah, I do. I agree with Sav and Ursary. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So do you have a 3 for tackles? Wyatt Milam, yeah, he's going to be a guard for sure. Yeah, raw athletic score. Yep. That's why Mimbu was one of my favorites, because just the RAS was insane for Mimbu, comparable to Trent Williams, and that was it. But yeah, raw athletic score, of course. Of course, I've heard of that. Pull it up. Is there a specific link for RAS? Should I just look up the tackle RAS? Compare side by side. Yeah. Or relative athletic score, my bad. Where can I compare it at? Is it just on NFL? Okay. Let's see. Can I even... Let's see. RIS.football. Bet. Oh, perfect. All right. I'm doing this and then I gotta go. So we're gonna go tackle, I guess. Face is kind of in the way. Upper right. Oh. Whoops. Ah. Sorry. Oh, compare. I got you. All right. My bad. My bad. Who are we going for? Jalen Travis. All right. Upper right, put Jonathan Ogden. All right. Is it working? I don't know if it's working. What's going on? Why is it not working? I believe you. I'm just trying to get it to work. I don't know why it's not working. Ah, there we go. Wow. Dang, that's a lot of green. That's a lot of green. I'm not going to lie. The hands, too, and the arms. Dude, Jalen Travis might be... Where did he go? Where did Jalen Travis go? To the Colts? Is that a great pick? Because, like, obviously the Colts, like, they need people. Indy, round 4. Yeah, especially with Fries and, what's his name leaving? Like, really? That's crazy. That's a good pick, though. That's insane. That's really cool. But that's all I got time for today. I appreciate you, Howie, popping in the chat, keeping it popping. I love it. I love it. Thanks for tuning in. Very smart, too. Goated. Anyways, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. That's an Awful Take podcast. I'm your host, Price Mertzer. We'll be back Thursday at next Thursday, 6 o'clock. We'll see you out there. I'll see y'all later.